I learned about the changes to our family trust during my third round of chemotherapy. The nurse had just hooked up the 4-drip when my phone buzzed with an email from our estate lawyer's office. Subject line, updated trust documents, final confirmation. Strange, since I hadn't authorized any updates. My name is Robert Mercer. I'm 53 years old, a civil engineer with the city planning department, and 7 months ago, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer. Not exactly the midlife surprise I'd been hoping for. I opened the email while the chemo drugs began their slow journey into my veins. The message was brief, professional, as requested by your wife Sarah. Attached, please find the finalized amendment documents to the Mercer Family Trust. All changes have been recorded as per Mrs. Mercer's instructions using the power of attorney document provided. Please confirm receipt. Power of attorney? I never signed any power of attorney for Sarah. Not for our trust. The fluorescent lights of the cancer center suddenly seemed too bright, too harsh. I clicked on the attachment, scanning through legal language I was too dizzy to fully comprehend, but certain passages jumped out like they were highlighted in neon. Removal of Robert Mercer as co-trustee. Sole discretionary authority granted to Sarah Mercer, reallocation of assets to exclude previously named beneficiaries, immediate transfer of investment accounts. My children from my first marriage, Madison and Tyler, had been essentially written out. The vacation property in Oregon that had been in my family for 3 generations, designated to go to my sister's kids if something happened to me, now explicitly left to Sarah's brother. And the small foundation I'd established to fund engineering scholarships at my alma mater was to be dissolved, the money redirected to causes determined by the trustee. 22 years of marriage disappeared in a 16-page document. The nurse, Elena, must have noticed something was wrong. Mr. Mercer? Your blood pressure just spiked. Are you feeling okay? I looked up, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Just some unexpected work stuff, I managed. Elena smiled sympathetically. Maybe put the phone away for now? Stress isn't good during treatment. I nodded, but didn't close the email. Instead, I forwarded it to my personal attorney, James, with a brief message, need to talk ASAP. Something's very wrong. Then I texted my daughter Madison, have you heard from Sarah recently about any trust changes? Madison replied almost immediately, Dad, I've been trying to call you. Sarah told me last week you decided I should make my own way and that the trust was being changed. She said it was your decision since you're facing mortality. I didn't believe her, but my son Tyler's message came minutes later, just heard from Maddie. Sarah called me too, said you wanted to simplify things given your prognosis. Said you felt guilty about the divorce from Mom and wanted to make things right with her. Dad, what's going on? I'd never said any of those things. Never even thought them. The chemotherapy machine beeped steadily beside me as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Sarah had been distant since my diagnosis, sure. Cancer changes relationships. Some people can't handle the sickness, the mortality, the implications. But this level of betrayal? It seemed impossible. Mr. Mercer, Dr. Patel's voice interrupted my thoughts. How are we doing today? He was my oncologist, a calm, meticulous man with kind eyes and a straightforward manner I'd come to appreciate. The treatment's fine, I said automatically. He glanced at the monitors, then back at me, his brow furrowing. Your vitals suggest otherwise. Blood pressure 160/95, heart rate elevated. He pulled up a chair. What's happening right now? Maybe it was the drugs making me emotional. Maybe it was just the weight of everything. But I found myself showing him the email, explaining in a low voice what was happening. Dr. Patel listened quietly, his expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, he didn't offer empty reassurances. Instead, he asked, may I speak frankly, Robert? Please. I've been practicing oncology for 23 years. I've seen how illness affects families, sometimes bringing them closer, sometimes. He paused, choosing his words carefully, revealing cracks that were already there. But what you're describing sounds like more than emotional strain. It sounds potentially illegal. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. I just don't understand how she could do this. Dr. Patel was quiet for a moment. I'm going to step out and send in Dr. Rivera, my colleague. She has some expertise that might be helpful. Before I could ask what he meant, Dr. Patel was gone. 5 minutes later, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor entered the room. Mr. Mercer? I'm Dr. Anita Rivera, hospital counsel and patient advocate. Dr. Patel asked me to speak with you. She pulled up a chair. He's concerned about what you shared with him regarding your trust. He shouldn't have, actually, he should have, Dr. Rivera interrupted gently. What you described potentially falls under elder abuse and financial exploitation laws even though you're not elderly. Oncology patients are particularly vulnerable and we take that seriously. I hadn't thought of it that way. Abuse. Exploitation. The words hung in the air, too heavy, too real. There's something else you should know, Dr. Rivera continued. All patient rooms in the oncology ward have recording systems, audio and visual. It's for safety monitoring, medication verification, and insurance documentation. Okay. I wasn't sure where she was going with this. 2 weeks ago, your wife came to visit during your treatment. You were heavily sedated after receiving anti-nausea medication on top of your chemo drugs. Do you remember that day? I shook my head. The treatments often blurred together. While you were essentially unconscious, your wife had a lengthy phone conversation in this room. She didn't realize the system was recording. She was speaking to someone about, and I'm quoting here, getting the trust changes finalized while he's too sick to notice. My stomach dropped. You have this recorded? Dr. Rivera nodded. The hospital's policy is to preserve all recordings for 60 days. Normally, they're only accessed if there's a medical incident or complaint. But when Dr. Patel heard your situation, he remembered your wife's behavior that day seemed concerning. He asked me to review the footage. And? My mouth was suddenly dry. And I believe you have grounds for legal action. The recording captures your wife discussing specific details about removing you as trustee, changing beneficiaries, and her timeline for completing these changes before, again, I'm quoting, he figures out what's happening or gets better. The chemotherapy machine continued its rhythmic beeping, a counterpoint to the chaos unfolding in my life. There's more, Dr. Rivera said quietly. She wasn't alone in this plan. I met Sarah in 2001, 3 years after my divorce from Kathy, my college sweetheart and the mother of my children. The divorce had been amicable, we'd simply grown apart and I'd remained close with Madison and Tyler, who were 10 and 8 at the time. Sarah was different from Kathy in every way, vibrant, spontaneous, ambitious. She worked in pharmaceutical sales when we met, captivated a room when she entered it. After a whirlwind courtship, we married in 2003. In the beginning, everything was perfect. Sarah made an effort with Madison and Tyler, organized family vacations, helped with homework. But as the years passed, subtle changes emerged. Sarah grew restless, frustrated by what she called the constraints of our life, my devotion to my children, my satisfaction with my stable but unspectacular career, my close relationship with my sister and her family. Don't you want more? She would ask. We could be living a completely different life. But I was content with our comfortable home, my fulfilling work, our blended family that, while not perfect, functioned well enough. Sarah's ambitions grew while mine remained steady. She left pharmaceutical sales and started a medical spa business that took off rapidly, expanding to 3 locations across the city. As her success grew, so did the distance between us. Small comments became more frequent, how my city salary was quaint, how my family was provincial, how Madison and Tyler needed to be less dependent on me. Still, I never expected betrayal on the scale. Never imagined she would use my illness as an opportunity. The recording Dr. Rivera played for me 2 days later in her office made it impossible to deny what was happening. Sarah's voice was clear, animated in a way it hadn't been with me for months. It's almost done, Craig. Once this is finalized, everything changes. No, he has no idea. He's so drugged up half the time, he barely knows what day it is. The power of attorney? That was the easy part. I told him it was for medical decisions while he was in treatment, slipped the financial authorization in with the hospital forms. Yes, I know I'm brilliant. The person she was speaking to, Craig, had a deep laugh that echoed through the speakers. You always did have a talent for getting what you want, Sarah. How much are we talking about? The trust has about $4.2 million total. The main house, the Oregon property, his retirement accounts, the life insurance, and the investment portfolio. Yes, I'm keeping the business separate, that's mine. What? No, the kids from his first marriage get nothing. They never liked me anyway. Of course it's legal, the documents are signed. That's the beauty of a durable power of attorney. I sat frozen listening to my wife dismantle the financial security I'd spent my life building, not just for me, but for my children, my sister's family, the scholarship students, and the timeline. Craig asked, what if he goes into remission? Sarah's laugh was cold, unfamiliar. The doctors give him a 40% chance. But even if he makes it, the changes will be done. By the time he's well enough to understand what happened, it will be too late to undo it. And us? Craig's voice dropped lower. Let's get through this first. Sarah's tone changed, softened. But yes, once everything's settled, we'll have everything we talked about. The house in Malibu. The fresh start. All of it. Dr. Rivera stopped the recording. There's more, but you get the idea. I should note that this Craig person visited you here twice, posing as a colleague. My mind raced through recent memories, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, Sarah introducing him as someone from a medical conference. He'd seemed solicitous, concerned about my health. Who is he? I managed to ask. We believe he's Craig Venier, a financial planner. And Sarah's former boyfriend from before your marriage. They appear to have reconnected about a year ago based on what we can piece together from the recordings. A year ago. While I was still healthy. Before the diagnosis. Robert, Dr. Rivera leaned forward. I need to ask, do you want to pursue this legally? The hospital will cooperate fully, provide the recordings, whatever documentation you need. But it's your decision. My first thought was of Madison and Tyler. My second was of the foundation scholarships, 3 promising engineering students who would lose their funding. My sister Claire, who'd always counted on inheriting the Oregon cabin someday, a promise from our parents I'd kept in my trust. Yes, I said firmly. I want to fight this. Dr. Rivera nodded. I've taken the liberty of contacting Linda Matsui. She's an attorney who specializes in cases like yours, financial elder abuse, exploitation of vulnerable adults. She's willing to meet you tomorrow. Thank you, I said, still trying to process everything. One more thing, Dr. Rivera added. Dr. Patel believes, and I agree, that you should consider temporary alternative housing once you're ready to be discharged. Going home to Sarah right now could complicate things legally and potentially put you at risk. The suggestion that I might not be safe in my own home with my wife of 22 years should have seemed absurd. Instead, it felt alarmingly reasonable. I'll call my sister, I said. While I was still in the hospital completing that round of chemo, things moved quickly. Linda Matsui turned out to be a force of nature, a petite woman with a spine of steel and an encyclopedic knowledge of trust law. She arrived with a legal pad full of notes and a determination that bordered on righteous anger. The first priority, she explained, is freezing all trust assets and accounts. We're filing for an emergency injunction today. The recording is compelling evidence of attempted fraud. James, my personal attorney, joined the meeting via video call. I've already contacted the bank and brokerage houses, he added. They're placing temporary holds based on the fraud alert we've issued. What about the power of attorney? I asked. If she forged my signature, we're having a forensic document examiner look at that now, Linda said. But even if the signature is legitimate, obtaining it under false pretenses, telling you it was for medical decisions when it actually granted financial powers, would invalidate it. The next 2 hours were a blur of legal details, strategy discussions, and paperwork. By the time we finished, I felt both exhausted and strangely liberated. For the first time since my diagnosis, I was fighting for something other than my health. Claire arrived that evening, her face tight with anger when I explained what was happening. You're coming to stay with us, she said, brooking no argument. Mark has already set up the guest room. I nodded gratefully. My sister had always been my rock, the one constant through every phase of my life. Have you told the kids? She asked. Not everything. Not yet. I sighed. I needed to understand what was happening first. But I will tomorrow. Claire squeezed my hand. They love you, Rob. We all do. We'll get through this. That night, as I tried to sleep in the hospital room, my phone lit up with a text from Sarah. Where are you? The nurse said you were being discharged today. I've been waiting. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to Linda, who had advised me not to communicate directly with Sarah until the legal proceedings were underway. The next text came an hour later. Robert? The bank just called about some kind of freeze on our accounts. What's going on? Call me. Again, I didn't respond. The third message arrived just before midnight. I know you're upset about the trust changes, but they were for the best. You're not thinking clearly with all the medications. We need to talk. I turned off my phone. The lawsuit progressed with surprising speed. The hospital recordings provided irrefutable evidence, and Sarah's electronic trail, emails to the lawyer, messages to Craig, transactions she'd initiated, created a damning timeline. The forensic document examiner confirmed what I already suspected. The power of attorney signature had been digitally copied from my legitimate medical forms and pasted onto the financial documents. 3 weeks after that first email in the chemo room, I sat in a conference room with Linda, James, and Sarah's attorney, a slick corporate lawyer named Philip Gaston, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as Linda methodically laid out our case. Sarah sat across from me, her expression a mix of defiance and calculation. Craig was notably absent. My client is willing to consider a settlement, Gaston offered after Linda finished presenting the evidence of fraud. We're not interested in a settlement, Linda replied coolly. We're pursuing full rescission of all unauthorized changes to the trust, complete restoration of the original provisions, and criminal charges for fraud and exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Sarah's face paled. Criminal charges? Robert, you can't be serious. It was the first time she'd addressed me directly. I met her gaze steadily. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Or did you just assume I'd be dead before it mattered? That's not fair, she snapped. I was protecting our future. You weren't thinking clearly, Ms. Mercer, Linda interrupted sharply. I strongly advise you not to continue that line of discussion. Everything said in this room can be used in court. Gaston placed a warning hand on Sarah's arm. We should consult privately, he murmured. Fine. Sarah stood abruptly. But Robert, you should know Craig has disappeared with the money that was already transferred. Almost $800,000. You'll never see it again. After they left the room, Linda turned to me. Is that true about the money? James nodded grimly. Partially. About $780,000 was transferred before we got the accounts frozen. But a small smile appeared. What Sarah doesn't know is that we've already located it. Craig opened an account in the Caymans, but he wasn't as clever as he thought. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit has already frozen those assets too. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of satisfaction. So what happens now? Now, Linda said, gathering her papers, we wait for them to realize how completely untenable their position is. My guess? They'll come back with a full capitulation within 48 hours. She was right. The next day, Gaston called with Sarah's unconditional surrender, full restoration of the original trust, her resignation as trustee, a notarized statement admitting to the fraud, and her agreement to vacate our home within 30 days. What about criminal charges? I asked Linda after she relayed their offer. She looked at me thoughtfully. That's entirely your decision. The district attorney has enough evidence to prosecute, and they're interested in the case. Financial exploitation of vulnerable adults, especially cancer patients, is something they take seriously. I thought about the 22 years I'd spent with Sarah. The good years in the beginning. The gradual erosion of trust. The final betrayal. I want to proceed with charges, I said finally. Not just for me, but for anyone else who might be vulnerable like I was. Linda nodded. I understand. I'll let the DA know. 6 months later, I sat in another hospital room waiting for Dr. Patel. My latest scan results were due today, and despite everything else happening in my life, cancer remained the most pressing battle. Madison sat beside me, scrolling through photos on her phone. Tyler says he'll be here by 6, she said. His flight was delayed. I smiled at my daughter, now 34 and a successful architect. She'd put her life in Chicago on hold when the crisis with Sarah erupted, temporarily relocating to help me through both the legal battle and my treatments. Tyler, my 32-year-old son who worked for an environmental nonprofit in Portland, visited every other weekend. You don't both need to be here for every appointment, I told her gently. Madison gave me a look that was pure stubbornness, a trait she'd inherited from me. Yes, we do. Before I could argue further, Dr. Patel entered, a file in his hands and an unreadable expression on his face. My heart sank. Bad news then, but then he smiled, a real, full smile that reached his eyes. The treatment is working, Robert. The tumors have reduced by almost 70%. Your markers are down. The lymph node involvement is minimal now. Madison made a sound between a gasp and a sob, grabbing my hand. So what does that mean? I asked cautiously. It means we continue the current protocol for another cycle, then reassess. But if things continue this way. Dr. Patel paused, his smile widening. We're looking at a very good chance of complete remission. The wave of emotion that washed over me was overwhelming: relief, joy, disbelief. After everything that had happened, this felt like more than I deserved, more than I'd allowed myself to hope for. Madison was already texting Tyler the news, tears streaming down her face. I reached for her free hand, squeezed it tightly. There's something else, Dr. Patel said, his expression growing serious again. I received a call from the district attorney this morning. Sarah's case is proceeding to trial. They'll need you to testify. The contrast between the medical news and the legal update was jarring. One battle potentially ending, another continuing. Will that be too much for him? Madison asked, instantly protective. Dr. Patel considered this. Physically, with proper rest and continued treatment compliance, Robert should be able to manage it. Emotionally. He looked at me questioningly. I'll be fine, I said firmly. This needs to be finished properly. After Dr. Patel left, Madison and I sat in companionable silence, both processing the day's news. I called Claire, Madison said eventually. She's making your favorite dinner to celebrate. And she said to tell you the cabin renovations are finished, the roof is all new, and the dock's been rebuilt. The Oregon cabin, the property Sarah had tried to redirect to her brother, had become a symbol of what I was fighting to preserve. After settling the trust issues, I'd immediately authorized funds to restore the aging structure, determined that it would continue as a family gathering place for generations to come. Good, I nodded. Maybe we can all go up there when this cycle of treatment is done. You, Tyler, Claire, and Mark, the kids. I'd like that. Madison smiled, then hesitated. Dad, there's something I've been wanting to ask. Are you angry? About everything with Sarah? I consider this carefully. The betrayal had been devastating, the legal battle exhausting. Sarah now faced serious criminal charges, and Craig, who'd been apprehended trying to flee to Mexico, had already accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony against her. Not angry exactly, I said slowly. Disappointed. Sad that 22 years meant so little. But mostly grateful. Grateful? Madison looked confused. Grateful that I found out the truth. Grateful for Dr. Patel and Dr. Rivera. Grateful for you and Tyler, Claire, our family. I took a deep breath. And strangely grateful for the cancer. Dad, no, hear me out. If I hadn't gotten sick, I might never have discovered what Sarah was planning. The cancer forced everything into the open. And in some bizarre way, fighting it gave me the strength to fight everything else. Madison was quiet for a moment. I still hate that this happened to you. All of it. I know. I squeezed her hand. But here's the thing about trust, once it's broken, you realize how precious it really is. And you learn who truly deserves it. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler, * flight landed early. On my way to the hospital. Claire says there's champagne and news to celebrate. * I showed Madison the message and she grinned. Should I tell him, or do you want to? Let's tell him together, I said, feeling a surge of gratitude for the family that had rallied around me when I needed them most. Some news is better delivered in person. As we waited for Tyler to arrive, I thought about the road ahead, more treatments, the trial, recovery, both physical and emotional. It wouldn't be easy. But for the first time since that devastating email arrived during my chemo session, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope, not just hope that I would survive the cancer, but hope for what came after. A life reclaimed. A family strengthened. A future still worth fighting for, and all because a doctor had been recording at exactly the right moment.